poor children in orphanages didn't make sense to me.
Daddy, what's orphanage?
So I did what I always do. Talk to other people, try to find a better idea.
Let the grandparents take care of them.
Ron Wyden's bill allowing grandparents to care for children from troubled homes passed in the House, with a little help from a grandmother in Oregon.
Mike Donahue and Shirley Hancock, News 76.
Today on Face the Nation, is a shutdown of the government inevitable? All week, the budget battles intensified. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats would give an inch.
He, in effect, said on the telephone, get lost. That was sort of the tone of it.
Why won't they sit down and negotiate? Will the government shut down next week, and for how long? And who will the voters blame? All questions today for the White House Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta. Shutting down the government on Face the Nation.
Face the Nation with Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer. And now from CBS News in Washington, Bob Schieffer.
And welcome again to the broadcast. With us in our Washington studio this morning, the White House Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta. Mr. Panetta, thanks. And joining in the questioning, of course, Gloria Borger, U.S. News and World Report, and Tom Friedman of the New York Times. Well, Mr. Panetta, let's get right to it. Is the president really going to allow the government to shut down rather than reach a compromise with the Republicans so the government can borrow the money it needs to keep operating? That's it in a nutshell, it seems to me.
Well, the president's made very clear that he's not going to be forced to make a choice between increasing Medicare premiums by 25% to the elderly in this country or shutting down the government. That's not a choice that this president or any president should have to face. This president wants to obviously continue the operations of government. We have a responsibility to do that. We have a responsibility not to default as a country. And the Congress has the same responsibility. So we ought to pass a clean debt ceiling extension. We ought to pass a continuing resolution without an increase in premiums for Medicare. And we ought to get on to the business of trying to resolve the budget.
Just in case there are some who do not understand, when you mention the Medicare, these are some of the things that the Republicans are asking the president to agree to in exchange for them agreeing to allow the government to borrow the money it needs to keep operating. But let me go on to Speaker Gingrich said just a minute ago on Meet the Press that he and this Senator Dole might try to call the president again this afternoon. First question, is the president going to be there to take the call? He also says the starting point for the Republicans is for the president to agree to balance the budget in 7 years. Could the president agree to something like that?
Well, first of all, the president's always willing to discuss these issues with the leadership. He did that yesterday. I was present when he had that conversation.
But you heard what Senator Dole said the president hung up on him.
Well, I mean, I guess the leadership, including Senator Dole and Speaker Gingrich, now decide to spin the phone calls the way they want to spin phone calls. But I can tell you that being on the other end of that call, it was cordial. The president made clear that he had to leave for the veterans events that he had to attend yesterday. But he also was very clear about what needed to be done. He said, look, there is nothing for us to talk about until you're prepared to drop this Medicare premium increase in the proposal. There is no way I can accept that. There is no way we ought to include that kind of increase as part of a continuing resolution. If you're willing to drop that, then we can sit down and talk about what ought to be in a continuing resolution, and we ought to do it sitting down with Democrats as well, so it's a bipartisan solution. Those are the two things that the president said. I don't think the president is asking for a great deal here. He's really just asking for both sides to sit down and let's deal with the crisis. Let's not deal with the other issues that they've obviously brought into this situation. Let's just deal with the crisis. And the fundamental crisis is let's keep the government going. Let's try to ensure that we don't default on our credit. And then if you want to debate the budget issues, I'm more than happy to do that.
Would the president commit to balancing the budget in 7 years, either on this continuing resolution or just separate? I mean, could you see the president, if you do resolve this crisis we're at now, can you see the president committing to what Newt Gingrich says he ought to commit to?
Well, look, the president has a balanced budget proposal that we've introduced. It's there. He introduced it in June. It provides for a 10-year approach to balancing the budget. Doesn't cut Medicare the way they want to do it, doesn't cut Medicaid, invests in education, and targets tax cuts at working families, doesn't increase taxes on working families. Now, that's where we're coming from, and that's the president's budget. President at one point, as you'll recall, did suggest the possibility of looking at a shorter time frame if they're willing to accept his priorities and his assumptions that are part of the budget.
So it's something he could...
I mean, they obviously rejected that at the time. Now, that cannot be part and parcel of an agreement with regards to the continuing resolution of the debt ceiling.
But at another
But
date...
in terms of discussing the broader issues on budget, that's something obviously we're willing to discuss along with other issues.
Let me just go back to this question of shutting down the government. You're the average citizen out there watching this fight. You are watching the leaders of the Congress call the president names. You yourself referred to this as terrorism. And some Republicans have said that that's in very bad taste, that they're terrorists putting a gun to the president's head. You're the average citizen out there. What do you think about this? Don't you think it's silly? Don't you think it's getting too personal? And isn't it a pox on all your houses?
Well, first and foremost, you know, there are some strong differences here in terms of the budget and the direction of this country. This is not just, you know, a kind of political game going on here in Washington in which, you know, both parties are kind of jockeying for political position. There are some very important issues at stake here, and they really involve the direction of this country. The president has made very clear he does not accept the extreme elements of the Republicans' budget. He's not going to do what they want to do to health care in this country and turn it into a second-class system. He does not want to break away from our investment in terms of education and technology and the environment. And he doesn't, for goodness sakes, want to raise taxes on working families. So there are some clear differences here between a party that wants to, and a president that wants to ensure we help working families, and a party that has a kind of extreme agenda. So are there strong feelings? Sure there are. And, you know, my Italian can sometimes get the best of me. I think the time has come to lower our voices, to roll up our sleeves, and first and foremost, avoid this crisis. This crisis is not only wrong, it doesn't have to happen. This is not a crisis that has to happen. Why are we here? We're here because, number one, this Congress is failing to do its business. It was supposed to pass all of its appropriations bills by October 1. We're 40 days beyond that. They have only sent 3 of 13 appropriations bills to the president. That's the reason we need a continuing resolution. Secondly, they don't even have a balanced budget to the president yet. They have not passed a budget to the president, so they're failing to do their job. Secondly, just let me complete the thought. Secondly, this is also part of a strategy. I think the American people have to understand that. I mean, Newt Gingrich himself is quoted as saying that the whole purpose of this, back in April, was to create a titanic legislative standoff with President Clinton by adding vetoed bills to a must-pass legislation increasing the national debt ceiling. April 3rd, 1995, and I quote, the president will veto a number of things and then we'll put them all on the debt ceiling and then we'll decide how big a crisis he wants. Just look at the last quote. I don't care what the price is. This is the speaker speaking. I don't care what the price is. I don't care if we have no executive offices and no bonds for 30 days. Not this time. So this is part of a strategy here that is trying to implement.
Let me just try to pitch this forward, though,
with crisis.
If I could. We're in a horse trading moment here. If this is going to be resolved, there's going to have to be some give on both sides. You said you've got to have the Medicare increase out of this bill. Let's assume that the Republicans say, all right, we'll take it out. What are you ready to give them that will provide them the political cover, too? Neither side is going to accept total surrender here. What are you ready to give them?
All right, let's do this by the numbers. First and foremost, let's avoid the crisis that we're facing. So to avoid the crisis that we're facing, let's pass a clean debt ceiling proposal that allows us to avoid default. And on a continuing resolution, take out the increase, the 25% permanent increase in the Medicare premiums. Take that out.
Fine, I'm giving you that. Now,
and then we'll negotiate the level of the continuing resolution. Beyond that, when it comes to the budget issues, the president has basically said to the leadership, and he said that to them last Thursday, I've accepted some principles that you care about. Principle that we need to balance the budget, that we need to protect Medicare, the Medicare Trust Fund, that we need welfare reform, and that we need a tax cut. I've accepted those principles. Well, now you've got to accept some of my principles.
Okay, fair enough. On the question of welfare, is the president ready to sign the Senate version of the welfare bill?
The president has made clear that...
This is a yes-no question. No. This one's a yes-no, because he's been all over the place.
The president has not changed his position with regards to the Senate welfare bill. He said that that was a significant improvement, and if it came to him that way, he would sign it.
So it's a yes.
But he's also said, just to make the record clear, that we want to see it improved in the conference.
How so, exactly?
Well, we have made very clear that we want to see the child care provisions improved in terms of funding, that we want to eliminate the impact of the SSI cuts that impact on children, that we want to try to modify those, that we want to increase the food stamp provisions, not block grant food stamps, and that we want to basically try to reduce the impact on immigrants. Now, all of that's been made clear in the letters that we have sent to the conferees. The problem right now is, frankly, the conference is going in the opposite direction. They are cutting school lunches, they are cutting child care, and that's unacceptable.
So,
he would veto what they're currently working on in the conference.
Okay.
Let me just go back to one thing that Speaker Gingrich said today, and we'll come back to welfare in a minute, but I do want to clear this up. He said that if the president does veto these bills and leaves the government in the crisis, the government is shut down, that he ought not to go to Japan, which he is scheduled to do. Do you think he ought to go to Japan? Would he go to Japan after vetoing these bills and leaving this unresolved?
Well, I think that's an unfortunate comment by the Speaker because, you know, the American people elect a majority in the Congress to help run this government and to help run this country. And it's supposed to be, I think, a partnership with the President and the Congress working together. That's not only true on domestic issues, it's also true on foreign policy issues. This President has some very important foreign policy missions with regards to both Japan as well as our trading partners in the APEC operation that we helped put together. That's a very important foreign affairs mission. We are still on track to make that trip. And I would hope that the Speaker would work with us to ensure that the President fulfills his responsibility on foreign policy and doesn't try to undercut it. So my hope is that we will not have to face that because I think it would be wrong for the President not to fulfill his responsibilities.
But would he consider not going if there is still this domestic crisis going on in this country?
Obviously that's a judgment we're going to have to make as we go through the week. You know, we have looked at ways to try to tighten that trip if necessary. But our hope is that the President can make that trip, and those are our current plans.
All right, let's take a break here. We'll come back and talk about this some more in just a minute.
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, Supermarket to the World, and by the Document Company, Xerox.
No matter how you try to spoon it out, or squeeze it out, or pour it out, you can never get the fat out of sausage. But now there's breakfast links from Green Giant. They're all vegetable with no cholesterol and 81% less fat than pork sausage. And the taste? They're everything you'd expect from the Giant. Breakfast links and breakfast patties from Green Giant.
Ho, ho, ho.
When you want the flavor, not all the fat.
This is a document in the digital office where you capture ideas and share them effortlessly. Whether they're on paper or on your screen, this is the space where Xerox works, giving you a simpler way to do good work.
And we're back now with Gloria Borger, Tom Friedman, and Leon Panetta, the White House Chief of Staff. I just want to make sure I understand where we are now. I see no movement on either side at this point, Mr. Panetta. What's it going to take to get the President and the Republican leaders together from your point of view at this point in time?
Bob, I think the most immediate steps that have to be taken is for the Republican leadership to agree that we're not going to try to increase the premiums on Medicare in continuing resolution. Back away from that position, we can then work out a continuing resolution and pass a clean debt ceiling and get on to the budget issues. But I think more fundamental in that is that I think the Speaker and particularly the House Republicans have to understand that their contract for America is not going anywhere. Its most extreme elements are not going to be enacted. And the American people don't support it. They have not been able to get it through in the Senate. Their President is not going to sign it. I think they just have to recognize that they're going to have to do things the old-fashioned way, which is not to just stamp their feet on the ground and threaten the country with default or crisis, but take these issues to the American people. And if the American people are convinced that they're on the right track with this extreme agenda, fine. But if not, Why don't we compromise and try to at least run the country in a responsible way?
All right, Gloria?
Mr. Panetta, I just have to ask a question here about the president. A while ago, we were hearing from Bill Clinton that he wanted to work with Republicans, that he thought he could compromise. And now we're hearing about the extreme Republican agenda, the extreme Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Why the change?
There isn't a change. The ability to work with another party is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street, which means that you're willing to compromise on some of the things you care about and that they are willing to compromise. Gloria, look at the history here. The president presented a balanced budget proposal in June. They rejected it out of hand. The president has basically said to them, well, I'm even willing to look at a 7-year period if you're willing to look at our priorities, our assumptions. They rejected that out of hand. Even in this proposal now with the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling, they've taken the most extreme elements of their budget and stuck them on as if to say, we don't care what you think, we're going to stick it on this continuing resolution. It isn't their way or no way. If you want to work together, it means you got to give and take on both sides.
Well, how do you account for Colin Powell's popularity then? Doesn't the public perceive that there is a leadership vacuum in this country because the president and Newt Gingrich and Bob Dole can't work together? And how do you combat that? How do you make the American public believe, as we head into an election, that Bill Clinton is the leader they want?
I think the American public ultimately wants a president that's going to fight for their interests. That's what it's all about. Now, admittedly, kind of Colin Powell stands aside from the combative nature of what's going on in this town, because that's what this town is about. You've got a president and a Republican Party that are on different courses, and you are going to have that combat. And at some point, Colin Powell would have had to have decided if he wanted to get in the presidential race where he would be at. But the president has made clear where he's at. The American people do not want to see these huge cuts in Medicare. They don't want to see the Medicaid program destroyed so that the elderly are thrown out in the streets. They don't want to see our investment in education and their kids for the future destroyed. They don't want to see their taxes increased. Working families in this country don't want to see their taxes increased. Now, when a president fights for those principles, he's on their side.
Mr. Panetta, I want to switch to foreign policy for a second. We've got the Bosnia peace talks going on in Dayton. Is it the administration's position that if the parties there reach an agreement, you will contribute troops to a peacekeeping operation there, whether or not the Congress supports it or improves it? Is that the administration's position? That's how I understand it.
Yeah, there's no question right now that if the parties are able to come to an agreement in Dayton, and we hope they are, because we've made a lot of progress on that right now with the fact that they're there discussing it and we've got a ceasefire there. If they come to an agreement, and required for that agreement to be implemented is an international presence with NATO, then the United States is going to have to be part of that.
Right. Whether you don't want the Congress to block it, but whether the Congress approves it or not, this administration is committed to sending troops to be part of that operation. Is that what I understand you to be saying?
I understand that the president wants the Congress to be able to say that this is the right thing to do. We will give him a timely opportunity to make that case in the Congress. But in the end, he also has to protect the powers of the commander-in-chief to do what is right. And what is right in this instance, very frankly, if they arrive at a peace agreement, is to play our role of leadership in supporting that peace agreement.
By the way, Newt Gingrich also gave you something of a compliment today, or at least the president. He said if it came down to a race between Gingrich and the president, and it was just on personalities, that he thought that the president would win because he had such a charming personality. Do you agree with that?
Deep down, I have the same feeling that the speaker has on that one.
Mr. Pitt, I just want to go back to one thing you said on Japan. You want to make this trip. You don't want Gingrich to put you in a position where you don't have to make it. But it is an open question in your mind. You certainly left us with that impression.
Well, again, our plans right now are to proceed with this trip. And the president ought not to be held hostage in terms of his foreign policy responsibilities by a Congress or the speaker. And so our intention right now is to proceed.
Right,
but I do have to tell you that obviously if we're in the middle of a crisis here in this country, that we would obviously have to adjust.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming. We'll be back in a minute with a little round table in a minute.
I will build a motor car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials by the best men and women to be hired. Any person making a good salary will be able to own one and enjoy, with his family, the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces.
This is the future of corporate computing. No, wait. This is. Oops, sorry, scratch that. The future is definitely this. On second thought, it'll be this, we think. There are many visions of the future. Most will turn out not to be right. But we engineer our network systems in anticipation of uncertainty. So no matter which way it all goes, you can't go wrong. Digital, whatever it takes.
This is a document in the digital office where you capture ideas and share them effortlessly. Whether they're on paper or on your screen, this is the space where Xerox works, giving you a simpler way to do good work.
From IBM. See and hear me at Radio Shack.
Teenagers hanging out. This town decided enough is enough. But wait till you hear what the grown-ups did about it. The town fathers versus the teens. Did they go too far? Monday.
And we're back again now with Gloria Borger and Tom Friedman. We have a little time to talk about some of the other events of the week. Tom, it's just a week ago that we were talking about the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. The period of mourning is now over. Israelis are now facing to the possibility that they have a new leader. How is it shaking down in Israel right now?
Well, Bob, the period of mourning is over today, and now the period of politics begins. And the big question in Israel right now is what will acting Prime Minister Shimon Peres do in terms of the election question? This is Peres's choice. He can wait till the scheduled Israeli elections a year from now. That'll be a long time from Rabin's death. Memories will have faded. Political positions will have coagulated again. A lot of people are urging Prime Minister Rabin to go to elections now to capitalize on the fact that polls in Israel last week showed him beating Bibi Netanyahu, the Likud leader, by 2-1. He could build a coalition so strong that he could finish Rabin's mandate, I think, without any problem. His concern, though, I think, is personal. I think he's afraid somehow to ride on Rabin's coattails. He kind of wants to earn it himself. Lyndon Johnson used JFK's coattails to get through the Great Society. I think Shimon Peres should use Rabin's coattails or his legacy to get through the peace process.
Of course, the other big event this week was, this will always be remembered in American politics, is the week that Colin Powell didn't.
Right.
How do you see that shaping down?
I think, I think it was a great week for Bill Clinton. I think that this was their long national nightmare was finally over, that Colin Powell wasn't going to run against him. We had some elections in the country this week in which the Democrats had some good news. You know, they finally won one. They won a gubernatorial race in Kentucky. They did that by nationalizing the election against Newt Gingrich and using the issue of Medicare, which we heard Mr. Panetta speak about a lot. And I think now they finally figure they're on to something that they can use in the '96 campaign. Newt has a 25% popularity rating, which isn't terrific.
The Republicans have had some very good weeks in weeks past. This was not a good week, it seems to me, for the Republicans, because I think in a sense that Colin Powell dropping out of this race in a way may even hurt Bob Dole. It would have been a much more exciting and a much more invigorating primary season, it seems to me. I'm not sure that Bob Dole couldn't have beaten Colin Powell in the end, but I think had he beaten him, he might have been a stronger candidate going into the general election.
Well, of course, and now we have all these Republican candidates saying that they're the ones who are going to benefit from the fact that Colin Powell dropped out. What was interesting to me is that a poll that was taken in New Hampshire after Colin Powell dropped out had Bob Dole going down and Pat Buchanan going up in the polls. So we really don't know how this is going to turn out yet.
Do you think that Colin Powell is out of the picture for good, either of you? Could he still not wind up on somebody's vice presidential?
I don't think so, Bobby. He clearly answers too much of a crying need, or there's too much of a vacuum there in the country for him to be out of the scene. I think there's so many alternatives, ways he can reemerge, vice president, secretary of state, who knows, even a draft at the last minute.
Well, precisely, because, I mean, who was more against being a vice president than Lyndon Johnson,
right,
and who was more against having him on the ticket than Robert Kennedy? But in the end, of course, people saw that there was a need there.
I'm going to be a little counter-conventional here. I think he won't do it. I think he didn't give himself an opening. I don't think he's Pete Wilson. Remember that the anger that the voters said when Wilson said he wasn't going to run, and then he decided he was going to run for the presidency. I think Colin Powell said it, and I think he's going to stick with it.
I think at a minimum we'll see him as the keynote speaker at the Republican convention every night.
3 times.
It's all right.
Let me close with a little final thought on that very thing, Colin Powell. You know, when I was a little boy, my grandmother was certain I would be president someday. She was wrong, of course, but that's how people used to think of the presidency and the kind of dreams that they had for their kids and grandkids. How different it is today. When Colin Powell told us this week that he did not want to go through the ordeal of running for president, most people nodded sympathetically and said they understood. When it became known that his wife worried for his safety, most of us said, who can blame her? That is the most disturbing part. American politics has become so vile, the process of selecting a president so odious and dangerous, that good people in many cases just no longer want a part of it, and we have become resigned to it. The next time you hear one of those sleazy political ads on television and wonder what kind of impact our mean politics is having on American society and the American psyche, ask yourself this question. How long has it been since you've heard a mom or a dad or a grandmother say, "Someday I hope my son or daughter is going to be president"? That's our broadcast. John Roberts will have more on the budget standoff as well as the rest of the news tonight on the CBS Evening News. Thanks for watching. We'll see you right here next week on Face the Nation.
One of the newest developments in nutrition is actually one of the oldest foods known to man, the soybean. For over 4,000 years, the Chinese have used it to make nutritious, protein-rich foods. But in America, the history of the soybean is considerably shorter. In fact, it didn't become a widely used food ingredient here until the 50s. One thing's for sure, though, it's come a long way since then. Over the years, one company has led the way in unlocking the versatility of the soybean. A company that each day continues to develop new ways to use this abundant, functional source of protein. The Archer Daniels Midland Company. That's using the old bean.
This portion of Face the Nation was sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world, and by IBM. There is a difference. If you'd like to write to Face the Nation, send your letters to Bob Schieffer, Face the Nation, 2020 M Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20036. This broadcast was produced by CBS News, which is solely responsible for the selection of today's guests and topics. It originated in Washington, D.C.
CBS News. Have you seen your country today?
We are taking our show on the road.
All week we'll be live from Texas
with the biggest